This is video 12 in chapter 7-8, the skeleton for anatomy and physiology. So in this video, we're going to start looking at the actual vertebral bones. And we're going to be looking at differences in cervical, thoracic, and lumbar in particular. And they all share some common attributes, but we will make a couple of statements in general about these. So the cervical all have a transverse foramen. On either side for the vertebral arteries. So these arteries run down both sides of the body of this, and these two right here are those openings, and they allow an artery to pass through. And I have an article that we're going to read together in class, and I'll post that on the vertebral arteries, because this is something when people crack their necks by twisting their neck, they can actually sever or injure those arteries that go through here because it puts strain on them. And I have an article about owls' necks and how they can turn their heads and the different anatomical features of an owl's vertebrae versus a human. So if we tried to turn our neck too far, we could sever these arteries, which would cause a massive stroke. And this has happened with people. In all but C7, so the seventh cervical vertebrae, something called the spinous process is bifid, which means that there are two prongs to it. So let's look at this, and we have both a superior view and a lateral view of these. And we're going to talk about C1 and C2. They're kind of a special category. They have special names and they have a different shape, and we'll talk about those after we talk about this. So with these vertebrae, what we're going to see is we are going to see here the body, which is the main bony part here. Here is that transverse foramen or opening for the vertebral artery. And then we have this little bony part right here. That is called the pedicle. On either side, we have this rounded surface. This is called the articular process. Articular because this is what butts up against the other vertebrae above and below it. So this is the articulation site with it. Then we have a part that comes down from the articular process, and this is called the lamina. And here is that bifid spinous process. So this is actually the posterior of here, of this, and this is what we feel sticking out, or when we bend our neck, this is what we can feel, and that is going to continue the whole way down the spine. And then we have a large opening here. This is called the vertebral foramen, and this is where your spinal cord goes through. So it's actually a tunnel. So all of these stacked on one another form a tunnel in which the spinal cord is going to travel through. So over here in this view, we can also see the spinous process. And notice how it is kind of reflecting down or posterior. Here is that articular process again. So we have one on top and one on bottom. And here is the body. So it's just a different view of it to the side. So they stack upon one another. So we have an articular process on the superior and inferior aspect of the vertebrae.